Welcome everyone to our continuing series on social emotional learning and wellness. My name is Lori Lacombe. I'm the Healthy Schools Coordinator for Douglas County School District. I'm so glad you're with us tonight. I am joined by three amazing Douglas County School District employees. I'm going to start with my colleague Jamie. Jamie, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Jamie Montoya-DeSmit. I'm the Prevention Coordinator for Douglas County Schools. And we really appreciate that you would take some time and join us for this presentation by a couple of our prevention counselors. And this presentation is being sponsored by Skyridge Medical. They're really great partners and they support our offerings in our district of our parent university, of which this is one. So I'm going to turn it over to Megan Tran and Tiffany Anderson.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today on our webinar, Building Connection Through Hard Conversations, Creating Trust to Talk with Your Children. Tiffany and I are both counselors for prevention. Tiffany is at Sierra Middle School, while I am at Crest Hill Middle School. And part of our role as counselors for prevention is we work off of a grant with 3 prongs, being community resource building. We also provide mental health prevention and substance abuse prevention. We host speaker events during the year, and this is our first webinar called Building Connection Through Hard Conversations. And we're glad you're here to support your child by learning how you can start having these conversations. Sometimes parenting can feel like the picture in the upper right corner of this slide. You talk and talk and talk, but you don't seem to feel like your children are understanding what you're saying, regardless of what you try. But truly, honestly, all research does show that parents have the greatest influence on their children's decision, and parents who are approachable and are eager to have these conversations can truly make a huge change in their child's behavior. It's not always through what you communicate, but it's also through your actions as well. And parents who set clear boundaries and let their children know about their own values and beliefs about underage usage of drugs and alcohol do have an 80% less likely that they will use drugs and alcohol in the future. So you parents are the greatest protective factor your child has to abstain from using drugs and alcohol. We are in a very unique time in history. While we are quarantined at home with our children, we can look at it as, wow, this is so hard. Oh my goodness, are we going to kill each other? But we can also kind of flip the script and say, wow, let's use this as a gift. Let's use this as a time where we can really see if we can connect with our children and start having some deeper conversations with them about issues that we're worried about. It doesn't necessarily always have to be drugs and alcohol, but this is really an opportunity for you to start having these conversations with your kids. And we are excited to share with you some techniques that Tiffany and I use as counselors to help you with this process.
So that we hope that when you leave this webinar, you will be able to use trusted adult principles to have those conversations with your children. Having preventative conversations with your children is very protective against them engaging in risky behaviors, such as substance use. Talking about these topics in an open and honest manner has been shown to reduce risk-taking with children and teens. Research also shows us that teens whose parents talk to them openly about their opinions on underage drinking and drug use are far more likely not to use drugs and alcohol. And as a counselor, what I've seen is that children and teens are most comfortable having those hard conversations with those they consider to be a trusted adult. So let's talk about that a little bit, what a trusted adult is. A trusted adult can play many different roles in a child's life. It could be a teacher, it could be a mentor, possibly a coach. And I hear a lot of times that it is a parent. And really what it boils down to is a trusted adult is someone who the child considers as being approachable and open to answering questions with accurate information. With that being said, I really want to take a moment and allow you to have time to take a personal reflection on some of the points that you're going to see on this slide. First of all, I want you to reflect on what is your personal point of view on potential situations that your child is currently struggling with or might struggle with in the future. Put yourself in their shoes and understand how you would react in those particular situations. I think it's also really important that you really reflect on your ability to be a role model in your child's life. I think it goes without saying, but it's a great reminder that children are very much able to understand and to really take in everything that's going on around them. They do witness and they kind of internalize the way that adults in their lives deal and cope with stress. And that can be in positive ways, such as doing deep breathing or being mindful. Maybe it's modeling getting enough sleep or taking walks when you need to. But they also are like sponges and also are able to see all of the things that adults do to cope with stress in a not so positive way. So take, for example, drinking a glass of wine. As adults, it's completely allowable for us to have a glass of wine if we're struggling through a hard day, but we really want to be mindful of the message that that's sending to our children. And we can totally expand this idea to what's going on in our world today. With the coronavirus, with being quarantined in our homes, the stress level can be really high, especially if we're watching the news all the time. If we're hearing all these negative things, we really need to keep in check the ways we are managing stress and modeling that in a positive way for our children. We also want to make sure that when we're thinking about having those really difficult conversations with children, that we want to think about what do we want the results of those conversations to be? Do we want our children to feel empowered by the conversation that we have to make their own decisions? And do we want our children to feel comfortable to turn to us for future conversations and future things that they need help with? My guess is the answer to those questions is yes, we do want them to feel empowered. We want them to feel comfortable. And last but not least, I want you to reflect on the context of the conversations that you might be having with your child right now or conversations that might pop up in the future.
Sometimes your child's behavior is an invitation to have a conversation with you. Oftentimes, a child might do something to push a boundary, to fulfill their curiosity, and you really want to try as their parent to be their go-to person who they would want to have these conversations with. Sometimes by your child's behavior, it's really an underlying question that might be happening. They're seeking your approval. They're wondering what can shock you. They really, truly do want to know what your personal beliefs are about things. So have these conversations often and about lots of different things, not just about the big questions, but about simple things as well. But when it comes to drugs and alcohol, research shows that parents should have these conversations about 3 years before first exposure. So let's take vaping, for example. That usually starts to maybe happen in middle school. So you really want to start having conversations about your personal values and beliefs about 3 years before that, but it's never too late. So if you haven't spoken about it, don't panic, because it's never too late, but just to be a person that they can go to. And now Tiffany and I are going to share with you a great way to strengthen the conversations you're going to have with your children by asking the right questions. So this technique called OARS came out of motivational interviewing. And as counselors, we are trained in motivational interviewing as a way to have our students almost feel like they are coming up with their own solution. So it's just a way to guide the conversation, and it's sometimes maybe seems awkward, but you can practice it about simple things, and then your child might get used to it. So for example, with OARS, the acronym is O, Open-Ended Questions, A, Affirmations, R, reflective listening, and S, summarizing. So for example, maybe when your child comes home from school, instead of saying, how was your day? Which they say, fine, whatever. Maybe say, what was the best part of your day? Maybe what wasn't such a great part of your day? And take as much time as you need to do this. With simple things, it's pretty easy. But if a conversation might begin with your child on an issue that maybe has you upset, like say the assistant principal called you and said they were found with a vape, you might throw oars right out the window because your own emotions take over, which is normal and fine. And I think as parents, we have all been there. So please always, when you're having these conversations, always take time for yourself and time for your child. And it is absolutely okay to tell your child, honestly, my emotions are really high right now. Let me take some moments. Let me take the dog for a walk, take some deep breaths. I'm going to call my girlfriend, whatever it is, and then we will have this discussion. So let's talk a bit now about open-ended questions. So instead of asking your child, why would you vape? You may say, what do you know about vaping? Why can imply judgment. So be careful about asking why questions. Why questions can also imply shame or guilt. So if you want to engage in a conversation about vaping, you might begin by asking them, how do you feel about vaping? What do you already know about vaping? Please help me understand.
So let's take this moment to dive a little bit deeper into using open-ended questions. Open-ended questions actually are not used in everyday conversations very often, so it does take a bit of practice to get used to using them. The thing to know about open-ended questions, or questions in general that you're going to ask your child, is you want to make sure that the questions you ask, just like Megan mentioned with the why questions, aren't going to put your child in defense mode. You want to make sure they're neutral type questions that you're asking. Open-ended questions really allow the conversation to flow in a really nice way, and it empowers your child to make decisions on their own, and it allows you to have a really deep and meaningful conversation that yes and no questions just really can't provide a lot of the time. So let's take some examples that are on the screen. Let's use that example of vaping because that is unfortunately a very trendy thing that we hear about as of recently. So instead of saying, do your friends vape? You can easily turn that into, if your friends wanted to try vape pens, how would you handle that? On the second example on this slide, you know people who blank, and you're welcome to fill in that blank however you'd like, aren't living up to your potential, right? So that question is very interesting because it does not really allow your child the opportunity to even think about their response to that question or to think about their opinion on that, but rather only gives them the option to agree or disagree with your feelings and your thoughts on that. A better way to ask that question that's really going to elicit a more in-depth response is, how might blank impact your ability to do well in sports or school? It really gives your child that opportunity to reflect on how whatever that situation is impacts them in their personal life. The third example on here is, don't you want to make your own decisions and not follow your friends? That's a great question. You want to make sure that you're getting that point across. But if you ask it, how might you have a conversation with your friends about how blank impacts you? That is really allowing your child to practice that skill set of having that conversation in that situation, which oftentimes that situation does involve peer pressure. So you're really allowing them the opportunity to practice how they would respond in that moment. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the A part of our OARS acronym. A stands for affirmations. And affirmations are statements that focus on strengths as well as positive behaviors. Affirmations actually can be used in any aspect of parenting because we all want to make sure, we all want to know that we're doing a good job, and we also want to know that the people that we care about and love approve of our decisions. Teens and children do care about your opinion, and so this is a great way to show that through affirmations in everyday conversations and in the tough conversations that you are going to have with your children. So let's look at some examples here. I appreciate that you're willing to talk with me about this. This is a great affirmation to use because oftentimes it is really difficult for young people and parents to have conversations. It can be potentially awkward, a little bit uncomfortable. So you want your child to know that you are really valuing that they are willing to have that conversation with you, even if they aren't the ones initiating it. Some other examples are you are clearly a resourceful person. It sounds like you handled yourself well in that situation is a great one to use because oftentimes when you're having a conversation using the ORS model, you're going to hear a lot of what's going on. And there are past situations that your child might talk about and open up to you about. You want to let them know that you feel that they handled that situation well, if in fact they did. And then something as simple as that's a good idea is really helpful to use. Because in this model, as Megan mentioned earlier, we are using this to help students come to their own conclusion. That doesn't mean that they don't need our support as parents. So we want to make sure that they know that we think that their thoughts and their actions are a good idea, if in fact they are good ideas. R is the next part of our ORS model here, and it stands for reflecting. So reflecting is really focusing on the understanding of what the child means in the conversation. You can do that in a lot of different ways. Probably the most common way is rephrasing things and paraphrasing. The difference between rephrasing and paraphrasing is paraphrasing, you are summarizing part of the conversation you're having with the student. Another thing that you can do is reflect and hone in on the feelings that your student is talking about. You can use the statement, so you feel, in order to do that. An example is, so you feel conflicted by wanting to fit in with your friends, but also being true to yourself. That's an example of how you could use that. But what's helpful with focusing on the feelings is you might be giving words to feelings that your child really hasn't been able to process. You can also say things like, it sounds like blank, or you're wondering blank, to really reflect on to make sure you're understanding what your child is saying. And last but certainly not least in our ORS acronym is summarizing. Summarizing is actually a crucial step to this whole process. It really moves the conversation along. It makes sure that you didn't miss anything important in the conversation. You can definitely give them an invitation by saying, is there anything else you need, before completely ending the conversation. And summarizing, really what the value is it ensures that you and your child are on the same page with what you talked about. It can be really frustrating on both ends if the child and parent don't agree or understand each other with that conversation. So we want to make sure that we are understanding exactly what they are saying to you and that you understand their choice and decision. And it's okay if your summary is not on point with what your child is saying. In fact, it's just an invitation to run through the ORS model again, asking those open-ended questions and using affirmations and reflecting to make sure you are, in fact, on the same page as your child.
Thank you, Tiffany. So the next step, after you have been able to accurately summarize what you hear your child saying, and they are in agreement that you are hearing them well, hopefully you have engaged them as a trusted adult and someone that they are going to listen to. We are calm, we are communicating, we are not lecturing, we're just really trying to give them accurate information on the health or wellness risks. You can share with them the laws, and most importantly, your expectations. I don't know about you, but I'm a child from the 80s, and I clearly remember the PSA with the egg, this is your brain, and then the frying pan. The police officer put the egg in the frying pan, this is your brain on drugs. Any questions? Research has shown us that that PSA did not really help at all with getting students and kids to not use drugs or alcohol. What history has shown us does work much, much better is providing true factual information regarding substances. Try to avoid the gloom and doom that's going on. And most importantly, to provide your children with information on positive social norming. Truly, both Tiffany and I are counselors for prevention right here in Douglas County. And we can tell you that according to the Healthy Colorado Kids Survey, 73% of our students are not vaping. It's kind of sometimes gets blown out of proportion for what's going on, but to really provide your children with positive social norming so that they do not feel alone or excluded by not doing these things, and to be the person your child can come to with questions. Tiffany and I have a slide on here with some resources that we found on the internet. There's links to some graphics of Healthy Kids Colorado survey from 2017 on alcohol, marijuana, and tobacco. There's also a conversation guide on marijuana and some tips for talking to your teen, but it's so important that you are providing accurate information. And if you don't know the answer, it's okay. Maybe you could research it together. Maybe you could find out together, but just let them know that you're a partner here with them and that you want to be their greatest resource, because who loves them more than their parents do?
Well, Megan and I want to thank you so much for this opportunity to be part of the Parent University. We also want to thank again Skyridge Medical Center for making this possible. If you do have any questions about this particular webinar or comments or just anything at all, clarifications that you need, please email Megan and I on anything with that. We also want to extend the invitation for you to email Lori Lacombe as well for the copy of this presentation, as well as anything that you'd like to see in future webinars as well. So thank you so much for this opportunity. We so appreciate that you have attended this webinar. Have a great rest of your week and stay safe.